I got to brown nose up to him every day. Yeah, Dave, you're the best. You're better than that other guy. You're better. You and I know you're fed up. Be a man, walk away. Do what you promised me you were going to do. Spit on the pants. I did. How about that, Dave? What the hell do you need, Dave? I'm getting steamed. I'm going to call him up now and tell him how you don't like the guy, for crying out loud. David Letterman, you don't like him, and be a man about it, for crying out loud.
Dave, I don't care for you personally.
Attaboy.
Okay,
Well,
right.
give me that chair. Finally got my own show again. Dave, I love you, sweetheart. I think you're the greatest. Ooh, I would never knock. Carson was nowhere. You're the guy, boy. Never like Johnny. You were the best. Always. And I love you, boy. Johnny was a warm-up. Larry King is in the closet. You're the best.
Katie, thank you for calling us
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you, Katie. Let's get lunch. We'll have lunch.
Right on, Don.
Take care, honey.
Tom, you have the most beautiful brown eyes, honey. And we love your
She's not
show.
talking to you, Don.
Oh, let's not fight over we haven't seen her. She could be one of those broads you see over the fireplace. You take a lot of chances, pal. She could fly right in here and we could see a real moose. Nothing personal, darling. I'm sure you're beautiful.
But I can't take anymore.
Well, I can see that. It's on the floor already. Somebody get a towel. He's starting to do that.
Thanks,
You're
Tom.
Katie, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, Katie. Good luck to you, sweetheart.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
You're brutal. You are just brutal.
Well, hey. Yeah.
But
What, do
I
you
mean-
have malaria? What's the
No,
matter
no,
with you?
I'm laughing so hard I'm crying.
I couldn't imagine what you're doing.
No, I'm truly...
Give me a Kleenex. Maybe we're both sick. Jeez, I feel like you do. Why am I doing this? I'm sitting with the host and he's doing this. Yeah, Don, how's your career? Next thing I'm going to see you going... Jeez, right. God, trying to do a show and the man's wiping himself all over the place.
Stop it. So I've lost control. What the hell's the difference? It's 2 o'clock in the morning, for crying out loud. We'll be back with Don Rickles after these messages.
No, he won't. I'm walking.
You have just seen and heard Tom Snyder, a longtime anchor for both local and television news in the network level, and a pioneer of late-night television shows, talk shows. Tom was best known for being the host of Tomorrow on NBC TV in the 1970s and 1980s, and The Late Late Show with Tom Snyder on CBS TV in the 1990s. Before that, for 4 years, between 1970 and 1974, Tom and I sat side by side, Monday through Friday evenings for the 6 o'clock news on KNBC, Channel 4, Los Angeles. Tom as the news anchorman and me as the sportscaster. We lost Tom in 2007 at the age of 71 of complications from leukemia. Joining us now is Tom Snyder's only child, his daughter Anne Marie Snyder, who is in the process of making a documentary about her dad. She's known as Annie by all of her friends, and it's great to see her today.
Hi, Ross. It's so nice to see you. And you can totally call me Annie because I think it's probably been about 50 years since we saw each other the last time.
I think so. You were about 6 years old the last time I saw you.
I think I'm just a little bit younger than your boys.
Yeah. Tell us about the documentary, which will be called Tom Who, and a podcast. Why did you decide to do this?
Well, you know, it's really a passion project for me. My father, as you know, was a very influential person in the 70s and 80s in terms of journalism and pop culture and bringing things to national attention that maybe hadn't been so explored prior in ways that were empathetic and respectful to the subjects and the people. And, you know, we all know this, people that are older, but a lot of people that are younger don't. So I have a son, Tom's grandson, James, who's now 21, and we were living abroad. He never really knew his grandfather because he was 6 when Dad passed away. So he didn't really know him. And at this point, he was 14, living outside of the United States, and he wants to be a director and a filmmaker. And he's looking at Alfred Hitchcock and Steven Spielberg and all these things. And he ran across a YouTube video of Dad and Steven Spielberg. And he's like, Mom, did Grandpa interview Steven Spielberg? And I'm like, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and Google Grandpa? Because honestly, he wasn't in our day-to-day. He'd been gone, whatever. So long story short, that's kind of what sparked me to want to do the documentary in the first place, because I felt like it's a legacy project. Wow. So we started from Uruguay, and now we're back here based out of San Diego, and we're having a great time. We've discovered so much, and it's great. I'd love to hear any stories I know it's my interview about my dad, but I'd love to hear anything you know about him, because it's just fun to talk about.
We'll get to that.
All right.
Tom was born in Milwaukee. He went to Marquette in his hometown. At one time, Annie, he thought he wanted to be a doctor, didn't he?
Oh, yes.
What caused him to turn to journalism?
Well, I think that he never really wanted to be a doctor. I think that was back at a time with a lot of people where your parents kind of decided what you were going to do, rather than you maybe having an opportunity to make that choice for yourself in any business. Yeah. If your parents were in banking, or your parents were attorneys, or in the case of my father, all of the uncles and their children, the cousins, were all in the medical profession. So my grandfather, Tom's father, just assumed, that he'd be off to medical school, kind of like everybody else. And,
Annie, wouldn't your father prefer being called a journalist most of all?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that Dad was a journalist first and foremost, because that's where his heart lay. And that's where he really shone. And I think he didn't really discern when he first went to the Tomorrow Show. I don't think he was really thinking it was an entertainment show. I think he was thinking it was an extension of a discussion you might have with a topic of interest or a person of interest, where you could really dig deeper, like a deep dive, they say now. So I think it was kind of almost like somebody called him the grandfather of the podcast. Where you sit down and you really unpack stuff and find out more about a subject or a person or whatnot. So, journalism was his bent, and he also enjoyed sitting with famous people and chatting, for sure.
I put together a list of words that I think best describe Tom Snyder: charismatic, outspoken, irreverent, deep thinker, a personality, and a man with a robust laugh. How'd I do?
Out of the park. Home run.
You want to add something to the list?
Empathetic, kind, honest, responsible, and loving.
Beautiful. Annie, what were your favorite times with your dad?
What comes to mind the most is a trip that we took to New Mexico when I was a little girl, and we went on the train. My father loved trains, as you know. He was a big train buff. And my memory is going to Santa Fe on the train with my father and my mother at the time. They were together, and we just had a great time. And also playing trains with him, even though I wasn't a boy, I was fascinated by the milk cart. There was a little milk cart that used to pick up the milk, and then I don't know, your engineer is probably having a real fun time right now listening to this, because he probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. But there are little milk carts and little gates that would open, and it was fascinating to watch. It really was.
How old were you when you realized Tom was a celebrity?
Before I realized that he was not just a normal run-of-the-mill, went to work, I think when we had What Is Your Parent Do Day at school, when I was in about kindergarten, and, it came, they went around the room, and one was, my dad's a lawyer and my dad helps treat sick people. And, they all went around the room, and I went, my dad laughs and smiles on television, because that's all I could think of to say of what he did. I didn't know. I think I found out later when people started reacting to me because of who he was. I think that's probably when I really found out.
Tom Snyder got his first radio job when he was 21 in his hometown of Milwaukee. He then went to radio stations in Kalamazoo and Savannah. In the 1960s, Snyder turned to television news, and he was not afraid of moving. First, Channel 5 in Los Angeles, then Cleveland, Philadelphia, back to Los Angeles, where we hooked up to Channel 4. When Tom became the anchor at KNBC, the station was struggling in the news ratings at 6 o'clock, trailing Channel 2 21-5. Now, you know this. Your father was not an immediate favorite in the newsroom. He was brusque at times. He never hid his feelings. One day, Tom came out of his office, jumped up on a desk in the newsroom, and shouted, "Excuse me. I know a lot of you are not happy that I am here, but I was hired to bring in more viewers, and I hope you'll help me do that." And with that, he jumped off the desk. Snyder wanted to loosen things up on the air, and he was one of the first anchors to introduce Happy Talk. I became his partner in that style of newscasting. Before I gave the sports report every weeknight, Tom would start a conversation with me about some subject. I didn't know what he was going to ask me. He'd come down the hall 3 hours before the show and say, "What do you want to talk about tonight?" I said, "I don't know. What do you want to talk about?" He said, "That's all right. We'll wing it." Well, at first, the producer of the newscast would give us 30 to 45 seconds. Well, we never finished that soon. Our interchange became so popular that the producer allotted us 2 minutes of bantering every night.
That's so
And
cool.
within about a year, or maybe a year and a half, Tom Snyder had boosted Channel 4 into first place in the 6 o'clock ratings. Later, Tom got his network opportunity in New York, and many years later finished his career in Los Angeles on Channel 7. Annie, when he went to New York the first time in 1974, did NBC offer him the nightly news program?
My dad moved into New York in 1974. And one of the reasons that he moved there was because their news, not unlike KNBC, was kind of floundering. So they had him come. And one of the deal points was that they said he would take over the nightly news when John Chancellor left. And we know
Okay.
that job
All
went to Tom Brokaw,
right.
who you
Okay.
had on, right?
Well, he did some fill-in or vacation news anchor work on the network, but he spent most of the rest of his career pioneering the long-form, single subject interviews. He was a master of conversation. Wasn't that what excited him the most?
What excited him the most, I think, was radio, to be honest. I think radio was the thing that excited him the most from the beginning till the end, because he had a real connection with the audience. And I think that anytime he made a connection with the audience, it was immaterial if it was radio or television. The audience was his most important part of everything that he did, because in his mind, he worked for the audience.
Mhm.
He didn't work for the network.
Right.
He was working for the people of the United States of America and the viewers at home. So, that was, I think, what he enjoyed the most. And when he was unable to do that for whatever reasons, that's when I think he wasn't as happy.
Yeah. Well, he hosted the Tomorrow Show which followed the Tonight Show on NBC from 1973 to 1982. Let's talk, Annie, about some of his interviews.
Okay,
Charles Manson.
that I can speak
And
to.
there was an unusual twist to that one because your dad first came to you before the interview. Tell us about that.
Okay, so with Charles Manson interview, you want to hear the background on the Charles Manson interview. Okay, so basically, Roger Ailes was the executive at NBC at the time that had taken over the Tomorrow Show to help the ratings of the show because things were changing. So they decided that Charles Manson was a good idea because he would bring in a big ratings amount. So they got Charles Manson and they got the interview. And he went there and he interviewed Charles Manson, and it was a personal thing because we lived up the street from Manson house. We lived across the way to where we could see the house. And in fact, when I came home from the hospital, I was brought home as a baby to a house that was on Angelo Drive that cantilevered over the Manson house. So there was a whole connection. Like it was always talked about. Kids in the neighborhood would go by the Manson house and things like this. So when he got the interview, I think he might have mentioned something to me about it, and wondering like, would that be okay? And I was like, yeah, go get him. Go kick his ass, basically.
Tom was not really happy with that Manson interview, though, was he?
Well, I feel like he thought it was a ratings grab, to be honest. And, I think that's where, when you started talking to me earlier, when you were mentioning journalism as his love, to him, and if you watch that interview, it's available on YouTube, you can see that he really is making an attempt to stay in that journalistic mindset that he's trained for. But he's talking to someone that's just not going to go there with him. Like you're not going to get that from that subject. But he still went through the motions. He gave him a chance. He let him go. He asked provocative questions or whatever. But, he did give as much as respect as you can to a serial killer.
Yeah.
He did do that. And he afforded the same respect, if I might, to, people like the first transgender that came on television ever in the history of time, quietly at 1 o'clock in the morning, sat and talked about it, and normalized the conversation. So yes.
Yeah.
Sort of went off on a tangent, sorry.
John Lennon.
So the John Lennon interview was a real coup, obviously, for those guys. Back in the day, Johnny Carson ruled the celebrity roster, and if you were going on the Tomorrow Show, Johnny had to make sure, and his gang over there, that it was okay. And John Lennon got to come on the Tomorrow Show because it was a political discussion. They were talking about his deportation issues, and that is also on YouTube if anybody wants to check it out. It's a fascinating interview. It's really not about the Beatles at all. Like all of his interviews, Ross, it shows another side of the person that's not what you would think it would be about. Because you think like when you go watch a John Lennon interview, it's going to be about the Beatles and maybe some, rock and roll stories that they have. But he actually had the attorney on that represented him. So again, even in rock and roll, he was trying to make a journalistic interview out of it.
Your father liked to be smoking a cigarette when he questioned someone.
Yep.
Any reason for that?
Well, I think the obvious take on that, is he was enamored of Edward R. Murrow. That was one of his huge idols. And I think he wanted to emulate him, not only with the groundbreaking journalism, as you remember, any of our viewers may or may not, they can Google McCarthy and Wisconsin and put that whole story together. But, that was a really important thing for my father. And that was kind of a template for his style, if you will, of, again, journalism, whereby he really wanted to, present it and let people make a decision about what it was that they had just seen.
Yeah.
So that was neat.
One night he had a show devoted to anti-smoking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, he did. And, he did make several attempts at smoking. I can't say that. He did make several attempts at smoking cessation. And they had hideous things back in the 70s. They'd lock you in a room and people would just smoke and smoke and smoke. And they'd like fill up a ashtray with cigarettes. And he tried all kinds of stuff. He couldn't kick it.
Annie, did your dad's guests demand to be paid?
Oh, no. That's a very good question, because some people probably wonder about now on Jimmy Kimmel, do they pay the guests? No, they didn't get paid. They never got paid. They came on because they were going to gain from coming on, because it was amazing advertising. They were sitting with Tom Snyder. At that time, if you were on Snyder's show, you were cutting edge, you were cool, you had like gone through, to the other side. Like, it was a very cool thing, I guess, to be on that show at a period of time in the late 1970s.
Tom had many fans.
Yeah.
But as you said moments ago, Johnny Carson was not one of them, was he?
Not so much. I don't know. I mean, I think that, they were not competitive in any way because their styles were so different. And Dad wasn't interested in ever taking over the Tonight Show. That was never even on his radar. Now the Today Show was bandied about a couple times. That was one that maybe, but, I think that they kind of pitted them against each other too at the network, truth be told. It's, you can have guests and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I don't know, Ross. I think that, at the end of the day, they didn't like each other, but they didn't hate each other. Maybe that's the best way.
But Tom had major support from David Letterman for many years. That was an ongoing friendship. Talk about that.
Uncle Dave, we love him. He's awesome. They have a very interesting and iconic relationship that starts all the way back to David Letterman's first television appearance outside of being a weatherman in Indiana was on my dad's show with Billy Crystal and Merrill Markle and the owner of Catch a Rising Star. So that was back in like 1977, and that was pretty cool.
And David was an unknown comedian, wasn't he?
He was at the comedy. Yeah, he was actually at the Comedy Store when they had him out on the show, and Billy Crystal was also at the Comedy Store, both of them, and they came out to New York, and then David ended up taking over this same time period that Dad had. He came on after Leno, right? So he took over the 12:30 time period. And 17 years later, when it was his turn to be a late night show host, he called my dad and said, "Hey, do you want to come back to the network? Because I want you to follow me." So it kind of came full circle. So he's very sweet. He's been extremely helpful and supportive in the documentary. Super nice guy. We love Dave. Love him.
Tell that story about the listener who would call your father when Tom had that 3-hour radio show.
Oh, so there'd be this guy, and he'd say his name was Jerry from Indiana.
Anyway, let me go to the phones. Here is Jerry calling us now, our friend Jerry from Tipton, Indiana. Hi, Jerry. It's Tom. How are you?
Hey, Tom. How you doing, man?
Fine, Jerry. How's it going out there in Tipton tonight?
Hey, good. Hey, Tom, looks to me like the audition is continuing for you, huh, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah, listen. Hey, Tom, let me ask you something. You like that NyQuil? Oh, man, that stuff is good.
I'll tell you, though, Jerry.
On the Interstate, the 465.
Yeah.
I got the big bore, big block 427 Hemi Cuda, with a NASCAR rear end.
Yeah.
Dialed it up on the cruise control 106, pal. I had the lights off, man.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Hey, who you got on tonight?
It's this guy. He's on with David Letterman. His name is Calvert DeForest. He was with David Letterman. Remember this Larry Bud Melman character?
Hey, Tom, is this the guy? Is this the boy who just got out of prison?
No.
Or something?
No.
Yeah.
He used to be on with Dave a long time
Let me
ago.
ask you something. Did you ever wrestle?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't,
You
Jerry.
look like you could wrestle, I'm telling you.
I could handle him, kid, let me tell you.
You like to, hey, you ever watch wrestling?
All the time.
Man, I enjoy it. Me and my wife, Linda, we enjoy the wrestling, boy. I want to tell you something. Tom, hang on a second.
Wait, hold on. Hey.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Okay, I'm back, Tom. Show? Tom.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, is Merv Griffith dead? Get him on.
No.
You ever see him on Dallas?
No, I don't see Merv on Dallas.
I enjoyed that. I like that.
Yeah, now let me ask you a question, Jerry.
Stop it! Stop! Hey, Tom, I gotta go check the circuit breaker.
Hold on. Hey, Jerry, let me ask you one question. Is he gone?
He's gone.
I think he hung up.
Hey, Jerry? Jerry? Oh, he's going to he's checking the circuit breaker. I wanted to ask him about his wife, Linda, you know?
He'd be like, he was like a truck driver, and he was always like, "Hey, Tom, this is Jerry from Indiana." And they finally figured out it was David Letterman masquerading as this crazy pizza delivery guy. And he would get my dad, though, like every time. And he would be like, "Oh, man, that was Letterman again." It was really sweet. You know, they did have a fun relationship over the years, jostling each other. Like you said, like you and Dad used to jostle on the way out.
When David Letterman became a TV superstar, he was responsible for giving Tom one of the biggest gifts in his career. He hired him, didn't he, to be the host of the Late Late Show. Your dad was a car buff, wasn't he?
Oh, he loved cars. You know, that started back with like he and Jay Leno were car buffs, and they used to hang out way back before Tonight Show or any of that, like a very long time ago. And he loved cars, not as much as trains, but he loved cars. And yes, as a gift for his service, I guess, to Dave over the 3 years, he gave him that car. Beautiful, beautiful car.
Another of his hobbies, Annie, was Lionel trains. I remember my wife, Lynn, and I went to your home one night for dinner, and in the living room at the ceiling, there was a Lionel train on the track just circling the room. He loved the trains.
He loved trains so much. And I think a lot of the reason why he liked them so much is in large part due to my grandfather. My grandfather, which is my father's father, Tom's father, was a traveling salesman. And the lion's share of his business occurred around the Christmas holiday because he would bring artificial Christmas trees. And, you know, this is back in 1953, 54, lights, things of that nature. And at that time in the United States, especially, there was always a train going around the Christmas tree in most homes that had a little boy in it, right? So he always had a train around the tree. So he grew up with it, and he grew up with seeing like these trains around his house all the time. So that kind of, you know, really got him the bug.
Did he tell you to leave his trains alone when he wasn't home?
Oh, I wouldn't have dared to step in that room. I mean, you don't go in there without him. He took his grandson in there all the time, and they would play trains together because he had another set. He had several sets. He always had a set in every house he was in, always.
Annie Snyder is our guest. Let's discuss now your documentary some more.
Sure.
How many hours of film or video do you have on your dad's shows?
Where did the name the Sex Pistols come from? Who thought that name up?
Some animal I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's history.
Well, I think history matters a little bit. When you say some animal, was this a member of the band that made it?
History does not matter. I mean, your program's called Tomorrow. There must be a reason behind that.
Well, unless we remember our yesterdays, there will be no tomorrows.
Oh,
America read that Manson led the marauding killers, that he held drug and sex orgies at his makeshift ranch, that he commanded others to kill to prove their love and loyalty to him. Television is supposed to make all of us look at ourselves, and that responsibility goes beyond picturing all of us as normal and rational people who are suddenly shocked when the time bomb of insanity goes off in our midst. To not run the Charles Manson interview now would be to ignore his perversity and that of others, which now and again disrupts our lives. To ignore it, to pass the interview by, would mean accepting wickedness and insanity in place of dealing with its problems. The Charles Manson interview will probably provoke dismay, possibly fear, even some anger. I hope it provokes some thought.
If you got out of here, there are a lot of people who think you'd go start killing people again.
Again? Mm-hmm. Well, you guys are misinformed. I haven't killed anyone.
Having gone through the Beatlemania thing, nowadays it's nothing like that. I mean, I can walk down the street and somebody just say, "Oh, hi, John," and they usually say, "How's your immigration?" You know, if it's in New York, right? And they don't hassle me. I might sign one autograph, two autographs, you know? And I don't get hassled. And I went through that period where I actually couldn't go anywhere. And so now it's like heaven. I can go and eat. We go and eat. We go to the movies. We go wherever we want.
I'd like not to talk with you this morning about movies, but rather about ideas. I may not be successful at that, but I'm going to attempt. All the pictures that you do scare people. Mm-hmm. What frightens you? What are you afraid of?
Most things. I'm scared of policemen. I'm scared stiff of anything that is to do with the law.
Tom Snyder, late night's big mouth. Now, where does that come from, for heaven's sake? You know, here again, you know, they set you up and then they rip your heart out. But anyway, Drew Barrymore is here. What's on the back of this cover? Why, for heaven's sake, look, that's amazing. Smirnoff vodka, 7800 Beverly Boulevard.
You know, people go, what would your life be like if it wasn't like it is? And the truth is I don't know, because it was like it was. And the truth also is I wouldn't have it any other way, you know, because I wouldn't be at this very place now, sitting here in this beautiful studio with you, comfortable in my skin, happy about life and just enthralled, you know. So everything is sort of fate and bleeds into each other for the right reasons.
Oh, this is it. I mean, you and me are it right now. There's nothing else going on that screen, and it gives the audience a chance to really understand what we're saying and see what we're saying, and in a lot of cases, feel what we're saying. There's not a lot of feeling on television anymore.
So the archival material that I've been discovering is the coolest part of this project so far, to be honest. Number one, I get to listen to my dad and I get to hear him, which is a gift in and of itself. And we've unearthed archives of approximately 1,000 hours of never before heard material.
Wow.
So we have quite a bit of stuff. And the nice thing about it is he is the narrator of the film. So we get to hear him telling his own story, which is really cool. And we've had great success with people being really helpful in terms of if they have something, letting us know about it, how to get it, you know, and stories coming through different channels and things like that. So, you know, again, he worked for the audience, right? He didn't work for the network. We go to the audience for a lot of the feedback that we're getting, because a lot of the things that we have, we've had to secure them privately because they don't exist. NBC wiped a lot of tapes back at that time period.
Yes,
so
they did.
You know this, Ross. You can speak to this, right?
Yes, like, you know, they wiped out Super Bowl #1 because they needed the tape. It was $750. And they wanted to get it on Wednesday night to use it for a network show 4 days after the Super Bowl, I guess. And, you know, Annie, they went for years and years and years until they got something that they could put together that at least resembled Super Bowl I, which had been televised by 2 networks at first Super Bowl here at the Coliseum. So as you say, there was nothing in those days, just erase that. We don't need that.
Yeah, you don't need it, and nobody owned their tapes and all that stuff. But we got lucky, you know. Again, social media. I've done just a very few amount. Like, this is 2 podcasts. You're the only other one I've done because I'm not on the circuit. But people have reached out, is the point, and been very helpful. And that's how we've stumbled across a lot of this stuff. So it's exciting. It's very exciting, and we're excited.
So you're talking about people who are his fans that want to help you, and I think that's nice.
It's kind of nice, you know. I mean, a lot of them are just regular people. Some happen to be in the business, you know, and they're wanting to be helpful. So it's just been really cool, you know, and it gives us a way to make a film that we feel is reflective of my dad, because it's got to be authentic like he was.
I can tell you your father would be very proud of you for what you're doing to continue his legacy. And I want to thank you for taking the time today to talk to us. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, it was great, Ross. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it.
We came on the air very quietly back in October of 1973, and I want us to go off the very same way. I thank you for the good times and for the ride, and I'll be right around the corner. George, a slow fade to black. Thank you all for watching, and good night, everybody.